We have just now gotten the mid-season patch notes for Season 4. We are seeing the patch go live on June 17th, and we are starting out with the class balance updates. Overall, we have gotten a lot of buffs across the board. There are no nerfs, no real big changes in terms of any nerfs. Only the Holy Bolt Elixir has been the Holy Bolt Elixir bug has been fixed now, which is a great thing. And I'm saying that as a Necromancer. Furthermore, healing pots have been buffed, which still probably won't really save you from dying that much. But what is really important here is we do have uber unique buffs, and those are crazy. Andariel's Visage is dealing 50% more damage now. So all of the people that actually have built the Andariel's Puncture Rogue are now going to go crazy in terms of damage. And another very good quality of life change is that the Poison Nova now spawns on the enemy instead of the player. So you can actually play a ranged Andariel's now. So we will have to see if there is going to be a Heartseeker variant that can somehow make use of this. So there's definitely some possible builds out here. We will have to see what the people can come up with that. Then Doombringer Explosion damage increased by 100%, but that's not really going to make it viable anyway. Starless Skies has the maximum stacks increased from 4 to 5, so you're now getting a 10 more multi on that, which is very strong. And then we have Tyrael Smite, where the damage of the Divine Barrage has been increased by 100%, so basically doubled. We will get to see how the Barbs can actually make use of this, and there's probably a Whirlwind build in here somewhere. Furthermore, we do have the Paragon stat requirements decreased from 90 to 60, so all the rare nodes that you were not able to get are now going to be way easier to get the additional bonus on, and that is basically because we lost a lot of old stats and stuff like that. So for the Barbs, they have been buffed for some reason as well, but not really the most OP stuff. It's basically looking like they want to make Whirlwind viable again because they're increasing the Whirlwind damage. Also, they increase the Divine Barrage by 100% of the Tyrael Smite, so you might actually see some Whirlwind Barbarians with Tyrael Smite creep up. And some builds evolve around that. Some more Whirlwind buffs right here with the Violent Whirlwind. We have Call of the Ancients that is being buffed, Frenzy, and to my surprise actually, Flay is getting buffed. If you have been keeping up with the Barbs, they have currently done a Bleed Flay build, and that is going to be buffed with the changes that you can see here. We do have a bleed damage increase from 10 to 15%, and the bleeding damage over time has also been increased by 8%. So there is going to be even more damage when it comes down to the Flay Barb, and this is going to be a very interesting build that you should check out. Then the other stuff is not as important, but in accordance to the Whirlwind buffs, or the Whirlwind push, so to say, they also buffed the Dust Devil aspect, where the Whirlwind Dust Devils now deal 100% increased damage. So there is definitely a Whirlwind build in here, because they also buffed the Gore's Devastating Grasp. So everything that has Whirlwind on is basically up now. We will have to see if this is enough to make Whirlwind actually a thing. And for the Druids, we have a lot of Spirit-born buffs across the board. Basically everything goes up. Only stuff that I would love to point out here is you basically get 10% crit now from the Scythe Talents, and you also get 15% attack speed from the swooping attacks. So that's pretty strong in my opinion, and it's definitely going to help you reach those important breakpoints a little bit easier. Then the Rabies is getting a buff. I'm really hoping that we can see a Rabies Druid finally make it into the game. Maybe together with the Andariel's Visage, we are actually going to have the option to be able to build that. And very, very big actually is the Pulverized damage buff with 76%. So not only are you going to do quite a lot of more damage in single target, but you are going to be shredding Helltide. So if you haven't played a Druid yet, after the 17th, leveling with Pulverize is probably going to be extremely interesting. Also, the Raging Pulverize doesn't have to do anything with the stun anymore. Now it is going to deal increased overpower damage. So that is just a straight up multiplier, whereas before you were just stunning, which didn't really do anything because you were one-shotting the targets anymore. This is going to help you one-shot everything even further, or way easier that way. Then we do have some passive buffs, basically some more damage reductions, some more damage across the board. As you can see here, Perfect Storm damage bonus increased from 20 to 30%, and also the werewolf companions have been buffed. Right here with the aspect of the alpha, the werewolf companion damage has been increased, so I really hope we can see a rabies druid actually emerge and become playable. So that is definitely something that I see here in the patch notes that is being pushed. So maybe we can come up with something. Here for a rabies poison spreading druid. That would be intense. Then for the necromancers, kind of crazy if you ask me. The skirmishers or the Book of the Dead upgrades here. The skirmisher sacrifice upgrade that was 5% before is now 10%. And don't forget, these can be buffed by 60%. If you sacrifice the minions, if you spec into Memento Mori, and this will then give you 16% critical strike chance, just like that. So hitting the critical strike chance cap has never been easier before. And the same goes for the resistances that you get when you sacrifice the defenders. Also, the shadow damage has went up from the Reapers. So that is a very interesting buff right here. With the shadow minions, usually I think of Bone Spear when I see this, because usually you were doing the vulnerable from the cold mages sacrifice, but now you actually get 20% increased essence generation when you sacrifice the shadow mages. So that's going to be very interesting. Maybe we can actually see Bone Spear make a comeback, but this is not going to really help Bone Spear that much, because we were kind of missing a multiplier, and this is not going to be enough. Crit cap was never a problem for Bone Spear. This is basically just helping Blood Lance and Blood Surge. Bone Spirit and Bone Spear never really had a problem of reaching critical strike chance cap anyway, so this is basically just a buff for blood builds. But yeah, as you can see right here, there is nothing really for blood, so they are where they were before the patch. So yeah, other things that I want to point out is basically the Iron Golem sacrifices have also been buffed across the board, basically all of them by 5% additional on top of that, so you have more attack speed, more max life, or more critical strike damage bonus. And yeah, depending on how we are going to go into Season 5, I definitely see Aphotic being fixed. Therefore, we can see the Golem being sacrificed and then heavily focused on mages, which is going to be buffed tremendously now by 35%. So that is something for the future in Season 5, maybe as soon as Aphotic is fixed and we don't have permanent Golem slams or Hulk smashes all of the time. Then the Paragon Tree stuff is not really that interesting. It's just that you get a little bit of more fortify, you get a little bit more damage here from blood begets blood, but this is actually not going to make blood builds viable, because again, it's missing like a 50% multiplier or so, and this is basically just 15 more. This is not going to be enough to actually make a comeback for blood builds. Furthermore, Sacrificial Aspect has been buffed from 25% maximum to 50% maximum, and this plus the buffs to the sacrifice upgrades already is going to be crazy. So I'm definitely going to play around with a non-minion version after these buffs, and then we will actually see if we can make blood builds work somehow. Maybe get a little bit more overpower damage here, a little bit more crit. Maybe that is going to be enough to make it a B tier build again, but I don't really see it creep up to A or even S tier. Then Shielding Storm is a very, very nice buff here. It changes from your base life barrier to your maximum life of barrier, so you are going to stack up the barrier with Shielding Storm even faster now, which is actually going to come in very handy. Unfortunately, this is basically still our only defensive layer that we can put on top of damage reduction. But yeah, maybe Season 5 is going to give us more. Then Rogues are crazy eating very good. We will definitely have the melee rogue comeback now with these buffs. Probably not so much with Flurry, but definitely Twisting Blades is making a comeback with these buffs. 20% on the initial damage and 20% on the returning damage is definitely big enough to make it come back. And on top of that, also the Blade Dancer aspect gets buffed from 60% as a max roll to 80%. Those are the spinny blades that you have going on around you after the Twisting Blades have returned, and they are going to be dealing much more damage now. So Twisting Blades, if you like that, that definitely has a comeback now. We will see if we can fit Andariels on there, but it's probably going to be a Shaco regardless. Flurry doesn't really do that much single target DPS, so it's probably just going to stay a Helltide speed farmer or maybe a tier 61 pit speed farmer, for example. And yeah, Sturdy has now been increased from 12% to 18%, so a lot more close damage reduction, which is also going to help the melee rogue sustain much better and be much more tanky. Also, the diminished glyph is going to be buffed from 10 to 15%, so even more damage reduction, not only for the melee rogue, but also for the ranged rogue. So not even only the melee rogue gets buffed, but the rogue in general is actually getting a buff. Another crazy good thing for melee rogues out there is that the Umbrus aspect loses the requirement of proccing through a marksman skill. It now procs on a lucky hit with a critical strike so you don't have to use a marksman skill now anymore. You were sometimes using Puncture, for example, which is a marksman skill, to proc Umbrus, but this is not the case anymore. Umbrus can now proc from your Flurry or from your Twisting Blades, making it a much better solution for more damage reduction for your melee rogues. So this actually is one of the biggest buffs to melee rogues in terms of defense, because you don't have to use Puncture anymore and you can do the whole grenade setup into the Twisting Blades rogue. So there's definitely a Twisting Blades shooting up in the ranks on the tier list with all of these changes. Then for the Sorc, we do have the same thing as we had with the Shielding Storm. We changed the barrier amount from 30% base life to 25% of max life, so you're going to have much more barrier as soon as you press your Ice Armor, which is going to be very beneficial. The 30% damage reduction from Shimmering Teleport is now going to last 4 seconds instead of previously 3 seconds. And also Incinerate has gotten a small buff here on the damage reduction from 15 to 20%. But way more important than that is the Glass Cannon buff. Usually you were taking 9% more damage when you had max ranks in Glass Cannon, and that is now being reduced to 6%. So now even in hardcore, you were already using this, and softcore anyway, but you are going to take less damage now from having Glass Cannon, and you don't even have to feel bad on using that at all. What I think is really interesting here as well is the Shatter bonus damage that has been increased from 25 to 30%. We have all seen Mekuna and Rob do some crazy two-man stuff with the old Shatter. Now I'm extremely curious how we are going to be able to clear the pit with the increased Shatter damage. I'm also preparing a Shatter Sorc right now to make use of, well, Shatter in general, but now also obviously from the buff here, and then we can actually see how far we can go in hardcore, especially with this buffed Shatter with my Shatter Sorc that I'm preparing. Also, more damage reduction buffs for the Sorc. As you can see here, Aspect of Concentration is now 25% at its maximum, and you also have the buff to Veer's Mastery, where it does not count every close enemy. It just triples your 9% damage reduction while fighting a close enemy. So it's way easier to get the maximum amount of close damage reduction from the Mage Lord's aspect right here. And for endgame changes is actually a little bit surprising for me, because we have health and damage levels that are being reduced in the pit. The adjustments are most significant when you are approaching tier 60, so it looks like a lot of players haven't really reached tier 61 yet, and therefore weren't able to get the Neath Iron required to fully masterwork their characters. On top of that, they are also reducing all Tormented bosses' health by 30%, including the Blood Boils from Tormented Echo of Lilith. In my opinion, that's a little bit too harsh, but I can definitely understand that the target audience might not have killed enough Tormented bosses to not reduce their health. So I guess this is probably a good change for the game's health itself. I'm just a little bit mad because I thought we were finally at a stage where it's actually fun to do those, and 30% is a little bit high in my opinion. This is going to make it much, much easier than I ever thought it's going to be honest. I think the health and damage levels reduction in the pit are, it's okay to raise the floor of the pit, that the absolute minimum of the pit that people can actually reach. I just hope that the health and damage levels haven't really been heavily reduced on the upper part. So hopefully they basically stayed the same at like 120, 130 plus. But from what I can read right here, it doesn't look like they have stayed the same, but instead they have been reduced, but by not so much as the ones that are basically below level 60. So you will definitely see some higher level clears right now coming up. So there is definitely going to be a lot more pushing and a lot higher numbers involved. But as I said earlier, the Holy Bolts elixir is now thankfully fixed and is not going to trigger and scale unintentionally high from Necromancer's minions. I think this is a great change. That should have probably been in the game a little bit earlier for my taste, but at least we now have it. So yeah, then we also have the fix to the boulder with the Dolmen Stone, so that works now. Also, Scoundrel's Kiss doesn't have a minimum range anymore now, so you can actually target stuff that is right in front of you. And they also fixed one of the coolest bugs ever, where the pets were counting as a minion in various cases. Basically, killing the sacrificial glyph for the necromancers, for example, or triggering the blood surge with the blood speaker pendant off your pet. That was kind of funny. So yeah, this is not in the game anymore. And yeah, I'm actually a little bit surprised that we don't get to see any mid-season new feature. We usually had AOZ, for example. We had the gauntlet, and I definitely expected that we're going to get the Season 3 powers back of some sort. To me, it looks like they just have shifted literally all of these things that I just mentioned and just are going to put them into Season 5, which would also really explain why Season 5 is going to be a little bit shorter. So we will have to see how it's going to go. Again, release is going to be the 17th of June, so that's coming Monday. And yeah, if you want to see how the Shattersorg is going to progress, now with all of these changes, I'm really curious how far we can actually push on hardcore as a two-man group. And yeah, if you want to check that out, I suggest you check out the Twitch. That is going to be linked down in the description below. And if you like content similar to this, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel, and I'll see you next time.